Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. Hello, welcome, my friend Leon Natker. I am so excited to have you on the show today. You are the new director of the Oklahoma Museum of History at the Oklahoma History Center. And I know you've been on an exciting journey previously and over the years, and we have some great adventures and experiences from First Americans Museum, and I know you have a wonderful journey ahead of you, and I'm just so excited to welcome you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and yes, I am the newly minted director of the Oklahoma Museum of History.
I just love everything that has happened over the years with the Oklahoma Historical Society, the Oklahoma History Center, my friend Dan Provo and Bob Blackburn, everything that they've done. There's such an incredible foundation, and I know you're going to do wonderful things. So I'm really excited about how everything's going and what's on the horizon.
Well, we're moving forward now. Dr. Bob and Dan spent many years establishing the institution. Dr. Bob, I just spoke with him the other day, spent much of his career developing the collection, and it's an incredible collection of Oklahoma's history. It includes a very large Native American collection. It includes all of the inaugural dresses of every first lady of the state of Oklahoma. And there's all kinds of cars and vehicles, things about the oil industry, things about all kinds of commerce. We are getting ready with Dr. Bob still to do a commemoration for the 100th anniversary of WKY. Radio, and then it was, of course, the first television station starting 75 years ago, and is now KFOR. So that's going to be something that's upcoming. What I'm looking forward to doing is to now taking the museum after its first basically 20 years in the new building and moving it forward into the 21st century and into a new style of museum interpretation and making it, I think, more engaging and more entertaining, if you will, but entertaining with the idea of educating people at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I think so many Oklahomans probably would not, there are suspecting exhibits that are you would think about, at the History Center and everything, but there are a lot of unsuspecting exhibits there as well. We have such a diverse, interesting history as Oklahomans. And I really think if someone hasn't visited, they need to, and they should plan to really spend some time there. And I know there's one now, is it the wrestling exhibit?
Yes,
yeah, that's so much fun.
We just opened that last week. It's a photo exhibit about the world of professional wrestling in Oklahoma. Right. Oklahoma was a very distinct territory. There was a period of time when before WWE and it all became national, that it was territories. And we had our own gang, if you will, of very special Oklahoma-style wrestlers. Right. So it's fun. It's a fun little retrospective, and I do hope people will come by and see it. But I hope people will come by and spend some time because there is so, as you say, there's so much in the museum, and it does take time. It's not, I can't get through it all in one day, but it is literally everything from our indigenous past to the musical Oklahoma and the state song. And there's an exhibit about, like I said, the oil industry, the airlines industry here. Of course, we have a great history going back to Wiley Post. And that particular era. So there are many, many things, and there are so many stories to tell. And what I like to do as a museum professional, my particular focus is telling stories about people, relating it to people, not just the events, not just names and dates. And that I want the people, the patrons of the museum, to come in and go away going, "Wow, I never knew that about that person." Right. Because there are so many in Oklahoma. This state has a very rich history. If you want to get really prehistoric about it. The first settlements in Oklahoma date back nearly 12,000 years. We had ancient mammoth hunters roaming the plains, taking down mammoths. And then there was a whole period of millennia where there were different hunter-gatherer groups that built villages and occupied this land. And so there have been people on the land of Oklahoma for a very, very long time.
Right. I think a lot of people don't really realize that. And you bring such a rich, informed, diverse experience to your role, not only in the museum world, but through archaeology, also through cultural and performing arts. You know, representing the opera from San Diego to all the work that you've done with digs and everything in New Mexico, and your work in the cultural world. I'm just really so happy that we get to keep you here in Oklahoma.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have been involved in the arts and culture sector of the world all of my life. I started many years ago at the Juilliard School as a performer in the performing arts, and I toured. I did a lot of musical theater. I sang opera. I taught in Europe. And then some years ago, I guess it was my middle-age crisis, if you will. I became an archaeologist. I just had to get out there and dig holes in the ground. I don't know, maybe it was a little boy thing, but it's very interesting. And I've spent most of that career working with different indigenous groups in the United States, particularly the Pueblos in New Mexico and Arizona. But also now that I'm here, I've been very interested in the history and the archaeology. A lot of people assume that the indigenous population, the native population, however you like to call it, all showed up because of the Removal Act of 1830. And that is very true. The 39 tribes, the way they have been resettled has to do with that particular period of our history, but it goes back way before that. There were indigenous groups here in Oklahoma Territory for thousands of years, and they had villages. They had great civilizations here. Spiro on the east side of the state is one of the great civilizations of prehistoric time. It was a ritual center, we think. It was very rich. People apparently came there for ceremonies. Approximately 2,000 to 3,000 people lived there permanently, but there's evidence that shows that people traveled back and forth all the time.
Right. I mean, if you look at, Spiro teaches us so much. I mean, it was that crossroads, the spiritual center, a place of trade and exchange and cultural creation. When you look at the materials that were identified at Spiro, you're right. And we don't teach that a lot in our schools, unfortunately. But yeah, we were saying when we were developing FAM that, we're the 21st century mound builders, and what,
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that we're still going to the river to build and create, that we're still gathering in central places like Oklahoma City, like at the Oklahoma History Center, to exchange, to learn from one another, to create and to share cultural perspectives.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that's really important about the Oklahoma History Center is that we have so much that there is there to share. And it's also, remember, we also have the Oklahoma State Archive, which is the only state archive of all of the 50 states that is actually linked with the National Archive. Part of that is because we have all of the tribal archives from the 19th century, all of the indigenous genealogies and so on. So it is open to the public. Anybody can come and access those records. You can trace your family. It's something to do at the museum. Come in, do a little research for your family, and then take a look around at the different exhibits and learn something else about the state of Oklahoma. Another aspect, something that I'm going to do with the exhibits over time is I want to talk a little bit more about the Dust Bowl era. I mean, most Americans, what they know about Oklahoma is the movie The Grapes of Wrath, and they all think that it still looks like that, which is, as we well know, that is not true. And the story that people tell from The Grapes of Wrath is, all of the Okies that left They all went and moved to the Central Valley of California. Well, a lot of people stayed, and those are the people that made it work and brought the state back agriculturally and the whole agribusiness aspect of Oklahoma. So I want to tell those stories about those people. There's a wonderful story I'm sure most people don't know. There was a women's basketball league here during the Depression.
We had a football league too.
Yes, I know you did. I know you did. Well, those are important stories. Those are important things to be told, so that people understand the diversity of what happened here in the state of Oklahoma. There's oh my goodness, there's so many stories. This is a place actually of migration. It always has been a state of migration going back 12,000 years. Now we have all kinds of different communities here in Oklahoma City and around the state. We have a large Asian population. Nobody's told those stories yet. That's something that we need to do at the museum. There are many different Hispanic groups, immigrants from Guatemala, from Venezuela, from Mexico that are living here, again, that we haven't touched yet. We have collections that can address that. We have photographic records that can address that. But those are things that I want to look at. And then, of course, we have coming up in 2026, the 100th anniversary of Route 66.
Oh, right. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It is. And there's some major exhibitions that we're going to be doing for that. We have a collection of neon signs from old Route 66. You know, Lincoln Avenue right by the Capitol, that was part of Route 66 back in the day.
We'll have to do another show and have Ken Busby and others come on the show and talk about it.
Absolutely. They must, because there's
a lot it's going to be great.
This was a big part of the Mother Road.
Right.
And we're going to commemorate that with some very large exhibits. We're already, developing them. I don't want to give away too much yet because it's still 3 years away. Right. But we have to think about those things that far in advance to get them all together.
Well, you're the right person to be doing what you're doing. You've worked in so many capacities of community and public outreach and connections, working with boards of directors. You have a great board at the Oklahoma Historical Society.
Absolutely. Wonderful people.
And I know that it's going to be a lot of fun to see where your journey takes you. And then your experience working with tribes. And as you were mentioning, this has always been a place of exchange. And if you're from Oklahoma, I say it all the time, that you have a really interesting story to tell. And I love that you engage the story of the person. And oftentimes people think about different cultures of people as like in silos, the Asian community, the American Indian community. But in Oklahoma, being that now we're a collaboration of cultures, there are so many different connects and layers to our food experiences, our cultural experiences, the ways in which we express ourselves as cultural people, and from like cowboy and Western heritage, American Indian culture. I just had my friend Toon Nguyen on the show talking about the Asian district and what everything is happening there. And there's so many kind of overlaps, beautiful overlays that are, I love that the History Center and the Oklahoma Historical Society and the State Museum of History can really explore and connect people.
Yeah, telling the story, actually, you touched on something in what you just said. Telling the story of Oklahoma through food is a way. As an anthropologist, that's something that I always love to do, is talk about food anthropology. Actually, I'll tell you, back in COVID days, which is what got me to Oklahoma when I was firmly rooted in New Mexico, and I had the job offer here for First Americans Museum, and I'd never really been to Oklahoma City. Right. So I'd been to Tulsa, but never to Oklahoma City. So I came here, and I had to, check out, well, what kind of food is actually available here in Oklahoma City? Is it all barbecue?
Right.
Because if you don't live in the state, you don't know. And then I went, well, let's see. We've got some Chinese, we have Vietnamese, we have Thai, we have Mexican, we have Guatemalan. We have a Guatemalan restaurant. How interesting must that be? And there's, of course, French. And then I had to have the places to shop like Trader Joe's. for my own kitchen. So that was something that decided me on really moving to Oklahoma. I went, well, this place has got to be, something's got to be happening here if there's all of this food.
Well, we're really fortunate that we've had city leaders and others that have really invested and have been real advocates for new experiences and commitment to projects like First Americans Museum. And, being on a long-term serving board member for the Oklahoma Museums Association, I really appreciate what the History Center has done for paving an advocacy path at the Capitol and for other issues in museum administration and realities that museums are experiencing, as well as other museums in the city.
Well, it's always a difficult path advocating for cultural institutions with legislatures. They all think, well, it's public money and we shouldn't spend it on that. But here are some facts about the museum industry. It's actually the fourth largest in the state of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. There are some 500 plus museums in the state. So it's worth billions of dollars in revenue to the state.
Cultural tourism.
Cultural tourism is a wonderful thing. And when you have a rich cultural heritage like Oklahoma does, that makes it so much easier. It's actually bigger than agribusiness in the state of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So that's something that people need to know. Nationally, the museum industry is worth over $40 billion a year in income. It is actually larger in terms of ticket sales than professional sports. 3 times more people buy a ticket to go to a museum in the United States than buy a ticket to go to a professional sporting event.
Preach it. I love this.
And I'm not denigrating professional sports. That's great. It's a wonderful part of the entertainment industry in the United States. But in terms of activities that families can do together, because that's really what museums, I think, can be about. And I remember as a child, my first museum experiences were in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, which is a great museum town. And Sundays, my father taking my brother and I to the Art Institute, to the Field Museum, to the Museum of Science and Industry, to any number of things. That was an outing for an afternoon. My dad was, I guess, typical of today in that when he wanted to watch a game, he liked to sit in his easy chair and watch the television. So we did get to go to games, but not as much as we went to museums.
Well, the museums appeal to multi-generations, like you're saying, but also that's the game-changing experience, cultural experiences that really change a 1-day visit to a 3-day visit. And you know what that means? That's the peripheral tax investment that's going into hotel and lodging experience, the gassing up, retail, eating in restaurants, and also non-local. So when people are coming into town to experience something, they're leaving their dollars here. Right. And that's being invested back into our schools and roadways and other needs of our infrastructure.
Exactly. That's a very important point. And I'd like to make a point about I alluded to this earlier about the 21st Century Museum. Back in the early 20th century, museums were still what we used to call cabinets of curiosity. Curio cabinets. Exactly. They were the cabinets of curiosity. That's actually the first name of a museum comes from the Italian Gabinetto di Curiosità back in the 16th century. That's when they finally got a name to them. Museum as a name came in the 17th century in England at the Ashmolean. So what they were cases. I still remember how museums looked in the early 1960s as a kid. They were big, dark cases with all kinds of strange objects, and they maybe had a little tag that said it was this or that it was this old or whatever, and you never knew anything about it. It was just you walk through and just would go, wow, ooh, oh, isn't that odd? But I wonder what that is. Well, now in museums, we can't do that anymore. That isn't really the purpose. The purpose now is to offer some interpretation to say, now look at these objects. This tells a story about these people or this person. This object relates to this person's history. And so it's all about interpretation and about people and about the people that made the objects, the people that used the objects, how the objects came into being in many cases. We have, there are just so many objects, the textiles, that could be at a museum, the cars. We've got some very interesting antique cars. I kind of love antique cars, and I'm looking forward to having some kind of antique car rally at the museum soon. Well, there are so many here in Oklahoma than people that have kept them in their barn.
Well, and engaging the first person perspective, when we're talking about historically with museum passive, now it's very active. It's bringing people together and creating a platform by which people can share their own unique experiences. Goes back to what you're saying about engaging that personal story. And we can do that here because, we have access to people throughout all of the communities. And what I also love is the temporary exhibitions or the traveling exhibitions that the Historical Society, the State Museum of History, the educational kits that are made available to schools and experiences with rural communities throughout our state and others that they otherwise would not have access.
Exactly. That's a very important part of our programming. I'm glad you brought that up, the whole learning and public engagement wing of the museum. And we have approximately 125,000 school kids per year come through the museum. That number is even larger when you consider all of those touring trunk shows, if you will, going outreach, because not everybody can make the trip. If you live up in the Panhandle, it's a long journey. From Durant. It's 3 hours up here to Oklahoma City. And we want all of these kids to have the opportunity to experience these stories, to know about the struggles, because there's, the old cliche that we study history so that we don't repeat it. That's really not true. If we studied history so that we don't repeat it, then after the very first war, when people came back with the stories, nobody would have ever done that again. That's not it. We study history to find out how our ancestors coped with life.
The capacity of people to transcend challenging experiences and overcome and share that human value of that resilience. It is
about
really
resilience, and it's about resilience in all the communities, from the resilience of the tribes that were moved here during removal and what happened to them. And it's a resilient story. It's about not just survival, but building a new community and a new culture. The same is true of the Sooners. And I know that's a controversial topic about the Sooners, but the Sooners were immigrants from a society in Europe and on the East Coast of the United States where they literally had no opportunity. These people took whatever they owned, put it in a wagon, and drove out to Oklahoma in the late 19th century. It was no easy journey just to get here, and then to claim land. And again, I know it's a controversial topic of whose land was it, but to claim land and then do something with it and survive and build a new society out of that. The same thing is true of all of the wildcatters when the oil industry started and people discovered oil. That was not an easy job. The cowboys coming across the plains. Most people don't know that the vast majority of cowboys were not the Hollywood image of the very well-dressed, well-groomed white Northern European males. They were ex-slaves. They were indigenous people. They were Mexicans, Hispanic people that were looking for a job. It was dirty. It was a nasty job. It was, and you might not get paid. You didn't get paid until the cattle made it all the way to the railhead, and it depended on how much the trail boss sold the cattle for. So you had no idea what you were going to actually make out of it. They may have promised you something, but you didn't know until the end of the trail. And still, those people survived. They built lives. They built families. Same thing is true of the Dust Bowl. a lot of people stayed here. They didn't have the truck to pack up with all of their belongings and drive to California. Right. They had to stay here, and they made things happen, and they made their life happen and rebuilt family farms, rebuilt the land, and those are stories that need to be told about Oklahoma, because that's when we want to teach kids about history. That's what's important about history. How did our ancestors make it? How did they get here? And what opportunities did they take? In many cases, they were making opportunity quite literally out of nothing. Right. There was nothing. There was no reason to go on, and yet they did.
People came into the state with like seeds in their pockets.
Exactly. With seeds. I mean, what did the Cherokee and Chickasaw and Choctaw, the first groups that were moved here, unremoved, what did they have in their pockets? They had land. They had been farmers, and they came here and they had nothing in their pockets.
Right. I also want to ask, some of my most enjoyable social experiences have been at the Oklahoma History Center. And I know that oftentimes people may not think about event activities that are available through our museums, and not just even large events, but also public programming experiences. What are you scheduling right now and in the near future for the Oklahoma History Center and the State Museum of History?
Well, the History Center, first of all, is available for rental. We have weddings regularly. So if you want a place with a great view, especially at sunset, of the state capitol, all lit up.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's a great place to do your ceremony and your dinner. But we have many different public events. We have classes, first of all. This weekend, there is a class in natural dyes and dyeing your fibers. And we have a concert. There's the Kilgan organ in there. Well, everybody goes by it and looks at it. It's in the exhibit from back in the WKY and the radio station. Well, it plays. The whole museum is actually all of the organ pipes. They're all around. So on the last Monday of September, there will be another Kilgan organ concert, and there's a schedule of that going forward through the year, and those are available to the public. So I encourage people, if you want to hear one of those big old radio orchestra style organs, it's a 4-manual. It's the whole building shakes. It's quite fun. And then we have seminars. We are doing a conference seminar on the 5th of August about boarding schools, the Indian boarding schools, and that's going to be a whole day event. People will be coming from all over the state to discuss that. So we have that kind of educational event, and so there's really something for everyone. If you go to the website to OK History and look it up, there's a whole list of events coming up. We keep people posted at least 6 months in advance, so that you can register for them, because some of the classes are limited. We only can take so many people into a class, so don't get left out. Make sure that you're aware of what's going on at the museum. And if you need a space for an event for your family, for your organization, call our events department. They are ready and able to help you. We have all kinds of catering options available. So it's a great space. And certainly there's also the garden space, which once the summer heat is over, it is a lovely place also to do.
Reprieve, once we get the reprieve.
Once we get the reprieve, right now we're in the midst of it, so we just have to roll with it. But certainly by the fall, the garden with the fountain is a beautiful place.
That's awesome. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and would always love to have you back to share updates.
My pleasure.
I know you're going to do awesome things with your incredible team, and I'm happy for you, and I'm happy that I'm happy for Oklahoma that we get to keep you here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's very nice.
And I also want to say thank you so much for all you've done for the First Americans Museum.
Oh, that was my pleasure.
That is near and dear to my heart, and you did so much. You've done so much.
That's an important place, and I was very happy to be a part of it. And that, too, is a very important part of Oklahoma's history.
Absolutely. Thank you for being with us today, Leon.
My pleasure.
Yakoki, thank you for joining us.
Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.